Imagine a mother who not only takes the lives of her own children, but then stands before an entire nation weeping, begging for their return, spinning this intricate web of lies.
To whoever has my children, that they please bring them home. We love them, we miss them. I want to say to my babies that your mama loves you so much. Whoever has them, I pray every day that you're taken care of. I can't even describe what I'm going through. I mean, my heart is just, it just aches so bad.
This isn't just a story. It is the shocking reality of Susan Smith, a case that, well, it continues to haunt America even today.
It really does.
On October 25, 1994, the world tuned in to this horrifying report. Susan Smith claimed a black man had carjacked her vehicle, and her two little boys were still inside.
Michael and Alexander, just babies, really.
Exactly. For 9 agonizing days, we watched her dramatic pleas for their safe return. But the truth, as it slowly emerged, was, well, it was far more chilling than anyone could have possibly imagined.
Yeah, and that's precisely what this deep dive is all about today. We're going to meticulously unpack how Susan Smith committed this unimaginable crime.
How and the why.
Exactly. And the elaborate deception she wove that just captivated the entire nation. And then we'll get into the complex, incredibly contentious discussion around her recent parole hearing.
Okay, what sources are we drawing on?
Our sources today are pretty diverse. We've got everything from, encyclopedic accounts and in-depth investigative reports right through to expert legal and psychological analyses. So it gives us a really comprehensive look at, well, every angle of this truly heartbreaking case.
So we can explore that deeply disturbing why behind her actions and the cracks in her story.
Right, those subtle but crucial cracks that seasoned detectives apparently noticed almost immediately.
And then her time in prison, what that reveals about her character, leading right up to that parole decision just recently.
Yeah, the decision everyone was watching.
It's a story about unimaginable loss, profound deception, and I guess the enduring question of justice. Okay, let's truly unpack this.
All right. So to understand the full scope of this tragedy, we have to start with the precise details of that horrific day, October 25, 1994. Susan Smith drove her 1990 Mazda Protege to a boat ramp at John D. Long Lake in Union, South Carolina. She had her 2 young sons with her, 3-year-old Michael and 1-year-old Alexander.
Strapped in their car seats.
Strapped in their car seats.
Yeah, it defies comprehension. She deliberately released the parking brake, allowing the car, with her helpless boys still inside, to just roll down that ramp and into the dark waters of the lake, drowning them.
It's just unthinkable. Truly unthinkable. And immediately after, she launched into this elaborate fabrication, didn't she?
Right away, yeah.
How does she present this to the authorities?
Almost immediately, Smith reported to the police that a black man had carjacked her vehicle with her son still inside. She even gave a description of this supposed assailant.
A description?
Yeah, claimed he'd forced her out of the car at gunpoint before driving off with Michael and Alexander.
Wow.
And this instantly triggered a massive frantic search operation. For 9 agonizing days, she kept up this national facade of her on national television, tearful, dramatic, begging for her son's return.
Yeah, it was incredibly powerful television.
It was a performance that captivated and horrified the country, drew immense sympathy. But were investigators actually buying it?
Well, not for long. Behind the scenes, detectives doubted her story almost from the start.
Really? How soon?
They began to suspect her involvement as early as the 2nd day of the investigation. There were several early red flags, things that just didn't quite add up.
Like what?
Well, for example, her initial description of the alleged carjacker was pretty vague, kind of inconsistent. Then there was the issue with the lake searches.
Ah, right, they didn't find the car at first.
Exactly. The police initially focused their efforts only within about 30 feet of the shore, assuming, if the car rolled in accidentally, it wouldn't go far.
Makes sense initially.
But the car was eventually found 122 feet from the shore.
122 feet, that's quite a distance.
It is. And that detail strongly hinted at a deliberate, calculated act. It suggested the car had been pushed, or at least allowed to gain significant momentum, not just accidentally rolled in.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, and where that web of deceit truly began to unravel. After the boys had been missing for 2 days, she was subjected to a polygraph test. How significant was that?
Oh, that polygraph test was absolutely crucial. a critical breakthrough.
Ah, so.
You see, a polygraph, the so-called lie detector, it tries to measure physiological responses like heart rate, blood pressure, sweat, things that can indicate deception.
Right.
And during Smith's test, a really significant inconsistency emerged regarding her description of the supposed carjacking location.
Yeah, that's what was it?
She claimed a traffic light turned red at an otherwise empty intersection in a place called Monarch, South Carolina. But, as investigators pointed out, a traffic light wouldn't just turn red for her unless another vehicle was present on the intersecting road to trigger it.
And she said the intersection was empty.
She stated it was empty. So the physics, the basic mechanics of how traffic lights work, just didn't support her story.
So it wasn't just what she said, it was that it fundamentally broke the rules of reality.
Precisely. That was the linchpin. A verifiable physical impossibility in her story.
So what happened when they confronted her with that?
When confronted with this glaring, verifiable lie, she basically flipped. She admitted the location wasn't Monarch, it was somewhere else entirely.
Okay, so the alibi crumbled.
It shattered her alibi.
Really?
And this, combined with the intense media pressure, which, interestingly, some reports suggest she had initially seemed to almost enjoy.
Really?
But then couldn't face as suspicion mounted well. It all ultimately led to her confession on November 3rd, 1994.
And what did she confess to?
She finally admitted to letting her car roll into the lake, ending the lives of Michael and Alexander.
With that horrifying confession, the immediate shock began to fade, replaced by this just haunting, universal question. How could a mother commit such an act?
The ultimate question.
To truly grapple with that, we need to delve into the complex and often conflicting theories surrounding her motives. Tommy Pope, the lead prosecutor, famously described Susan as selfish. What did he mean by that?
Well, the prosecution's theory was indeed stark and, frankly, deeply disturbing. The state argued her motivation was purely self-serving.
Self-serving how?
They argued it was to facilitate a relationship with a wealthy local man named Tom Finley.
I remember that name.
He had reportedly sent her a letter stating he didn't want children,
Okay.
making her sons, Michael and Alexander, an undeniable obstacle to the new, maybe more affluent life she envisioned with him.
So the kids were in the way of this relationship.
That was the prosecution's argument. The prosecutor even pointed to a really telling detail. Everything but her then-husband, David, was in the car that went into the lake, the children, naturally, but also a wedding album, even her wedding dress.
Her wedding dress, wow.
Suggesting perhaps a symbolic and physical break from her past life, removing all perceived barriers to this new future she wanted.
That paints a picture of extreme calculation, just coldness. But her attorneys, David Bruck and Judy Clark, they presented a vastly different picture, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. A completely different narrative.
They argued she was deeply troubled, suffering from severe depression, impaired judgment. I remember them saying, this is not a case about evil, this is a case about despair and sadness. How did they build that case?
They absolutely did build that case. The defense's theory, focusing on her mental state, was that Smith drove to the lake that night with the initial intent to commit suicide.
Suicide?
Yes, and to take her sons with her. However, they claimed that at the very last moment, her body, quote, willed itself out of the car, leaving her children to drown while she survived.
So a kind of failed murder-suicide where only she survived.
Essentially, yes. And they backed this up with diagnoses. She was diagnosed with dependent personality disorder and major depression.
Can you explain dependent personality disorder a bit?
Sure. It's characterized by this pervasive psychological dependence on other people, a real need to be taken care of, and a deep fear of separation or abandonment.
Okay.
The defense argued these conditions, combined with severe depression, could profoundly impair her judgment, leading to impulsive, tragic decisions. They painted a picture of a woman deeply disconnected from reality in those moments, just overwhelmed by despair.
So the defense framed it as this desperate act born out of profound mental illness rather than cold calculation. What about Susan herself? What did she say about her motives?
In her own statements, Susan claimed there was, well, no motive, no premeditated plan. She insisted she was simply not in a right state of mind when she committed the acts.
So she blamed her mental state entirely.
She essentially suggested it was a moment of profound psychological breakdown, not a calculated decision.
And her ex-husband, David Smith. He's lived with this unimaginable tragedy for decades. Does he feel he ever got a clear answer as to why?
David Smith, even now, has stated he doesn't believe he truly knows why she did it. He described her as always having been manipulative.
Manipulative?
Yes, and he believes her apology to him after her arrest wasn't genuine, but more of a performance.
That's harsh.
For David, the focus has always been clear. The true victims were Michael and Alex. His energy has gone into remembering them and ensuring justice for their lost lives. He's consistently argued against any leniency for Susan.
So we have these incredibly conflicting narratives, calculated selfishness versus profound despair, yet the jury's decision was remarkably swift.
Very swift.
It took them only, what, 2.5 hours to convict her of murder?
That's right, 2.5 hours.
They ultimately voted against the death penalty, though, sentencing her to 2 concurrent life terms with the possibility of parole after 30 years.
Correct. Which brings us to her life behind bars.
Right. 30 years is a long time.
Indeed. And her life behind bars was far from quiet. Susan Smith was initially incarcerated in the Administrative Segregation Unit at Camille Griffin Graham Correctional Institution in Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay.
But what's truly astonishing and perhaps revealing about her character, or maybe her ability to influence people, is what happened next.
I remember hearing about some incidents. What were these shocking things that occurred while she was incarcerated there?
Well, in 2000, just a few years into her sentence, 2 correctional officers were actually charged with having sexual relations with Smith while she was an inmate.
2 officers? Seriously?
Yes. One, Houston Cagle, pleaded guilty. Another, Captain Alfred Rode, also confessed.
A captain?
Yes. And what's particularly unsettling about this, and maybe it speaks to Smith's possible manipulative charm, is that Alfred Rode noted that Smith was apparently revered among other female inmates.
Revered? But usually inmates who harm children are ostracized, aren't they?
Exactly. It's quite surprising given the typical disdain incarcerated individuals often have for child killers. It really forces you to question, if true remorse or genuine change is possible when these kinds of patterns, maybe influence or self-interest, seem to persist even within the confines of prison.
That's a chilling thought. So following these incidents, she was moved, right?
Yes, she was transferred to Leith Correctional Institution in Greenwood, where she has remained ever since.
But her disciplinary record didn't just end with those sexual misconduct incidents, did it? What else has her time at Leith revealed about her conduct?
No, her record at Leith includes quite a number of disciplinary sanctions that certainly raise questions about her behavior and ultimately her suitability for parole.
Okay, like what specifically?
Well, the details are quite revealing. In 2024, for instance, just recently, she was sanctioned for communicating with a news reporter for a documentary. Apparently, money was even deposited into her account by the media person involved.
Wow, okay. What else?
She also had multiple instances of drug possession, narcotics, and marijuana back in 2002, 2010, and 2015.
Repeated drug offenses.
Yes. And there was unauthorized use of another inmate's peon number in 2012. And even a charge listed as mutilation in 2010, though details on that specific incident are less clear publicly.
Mutilation. That sounds serious.
It does. Some of these infractions led to consequences like having her telephone privileges suspended for 6 months.
Now, looking at that record, we have different perspectives on how significant it is, right? John Mobley, a criminal defense attorney, argues these are relatively minor infractions over 30 years.
Right.
He suggests, anyone incarcerated that long is bound to have some bad days, and these shouldn't be a major factor in parole. What's the counter-argument to that?
Well, Larry Levine, who works as a prison consultant, offers a different view. He suggests that while her infractions might seem minor compared to, say, inmates who commit violent acts within prison, her consistent history of breaking policy, like the sexual conduct with guards, which she absolutely knew was against the rules, doesn't really bode well for her ability to follow rules if she were paroled.
So it's the pattern, not just the severity.
Exactly. He also underlines the point that someone who kills their children isn't, in his words, mentally stable to begin with, implying a fundamental character issue that these ongoing infractions might continue to reflect.
So it's this debate. Are these isolated bad days? Or is it a pattern of disregard for rules, maybe even manipulation, that echoes her behavior before prison?
That's the core tension, yeah.
This brings us right to the moment of truth for Susan Smith. She became first eligible for parole on November 20, 2024, after serving exactly 30 years.
The 30-year mark.
And, as was widely reported, her parole was denied. There were even reports she threw a tantrum in her cell afterward. What exactly does the parole board consider in a case like this? It must be incredibly difficult.
It's a huge responsibility. The parole board's process in South Carolina is indeed quite thorough. It's a 7-member board, and they weigh a multitude of factors.
Such as?
Well, obviously, the inmate's behavior in prison, which we've just discussed. Also, the precise nature and severity of the original crime committed. And perhaps most critically, the potential threat of future bad behavior, the likelihood of reoffending.
Assessing future risk.
They hear from all sides, victims and anyone speaking on their behalf. It's a very comprehensive review designed to assess if an individual is truly rehabilitated and, crucially, safe to re-enter society.
And central to this process for 30 long years has been her ex-husband, David Smith. He's consistently fought against her release, hasn't he?
Absolutely.
Tirelessly.
He spent these decades reminding people that Michael and Alex are the true victims. What was his message specifically to the parole board this time?
David Smith has been resolute, just unwavering in his stance. He stated repeatedly that if she were released, there would simply be no justice for his sons.
Strong words. He openly expressed how he dreaded this year, the year of her parole eligibility. And he made it clear he planned to address the parole board in person to ensure his sons' voices were powerfully heard, advocating for her to remain incarcerated for the rest of her life.
And the prosecution's stance. Did former prosecutor Tommy Pope, the one who secured her conviction, also weigh in?
Yes, his stance was equally resolute. Tommy Pope indicated he would tell the board that the jury, in his view, when they chose life instead of death, believed life meant life.
Her natural life.
Exactly. And that Susan Smith would spend her time focused on Michael and Alex. He believes her prison conduct, with all those infractions, suggests that hasn't been the case.
So for him, the denial aligns with justice.
From his perspective, yes. The denial of parole aligns perfectly with justice for the profound crime she committed. It sends a clear message about accountability.
So we have these very strong voices arguing for her continued incarceration. But were there differing expert opinions on her suitability for release or maybe the likelihood of her reoffending?
Oh, absolutely. There were other perspectives. Dr. Judy Ho, who is a clinical and forensic neuropsychologist, she raised some pointed questions.
Like what?
She questioned whether Smith has truly suffered enough for her crimes, and importantly, pointed to what she saw as an apparent lack of deep, discernible remorse over the years.
Lack of remorse is a big factor for parole boards, usually.
It often is. Dr. Ho posed critical questions like, would Smith truly be a productive citizen if released? And is there any concrete evidence that she genuinely wants to change her life beyond simply wanting freedom?
Difficult questions with no easy answers. What about John Mobley's counterpoint regarding the challenges of parole for long-term inmates? How does that fit in?
Right. John Mobley highlights a very real, practical challenge.
Yeah.
The difficult transition for inmates who've spent their entire adult lives locked up.
30 years is most of her adult life.
Exactly. He pointed out that only about 8% of parole applicants in South Carolina are actually released, which shows how stringent the process is.
Only 8%. Wow.
He argued that practical factors, like having potential job offers lined up, having a stable living environment ready outside prison, these things are absolutely crucial for successful reintegration.
Support systems.
Precisely. Because inmates can struggle immensely with just the basic complexities of the outside world after decades inside. He suggested that if these support systems are firmly in place, the likelihood of reoffending significantly decreases. So he was making a case for potentially careful, supported release, rather than outright denial based solely on past infractions or the original crime.
It's a complex balance. While Tommy Pope, the prosecutor, said he doesn't believe Susan Smith would necessarily drown more children if released.
Right, you gave that distinction.
The core debate for the parole board, and really for us, the public, revolves around much deeper questions, doesn't it? What are those ultimate questions you feel this case leaves us grappling with?
I think it truly boils down to a couple things. First, whether the punishment 30 years served, life sentence ongoing, truly equates to the crime in the eyes of justice. That's a philosophical debate in itself.
Right.
And maybe more crucially, the question of genuine change. Has Susan Smith genuinely changed? Has that deeply self-centered nature, the one the prosecutor described, truly been transformed? Or does it still subtly influence her actions and desires, even manifesting in those prison infractions?
Can you ever really know?
That's the challenge. It's the enduring question of whether true rehabilitation is even possible for such a profound crime, and how society balances the need for punishment and public safety with the potential, however slim, for human change.
We have taken a deep dive today into the truly harrowing case of Susan Smith, from that calculated deception that just stunned a nation,
Absolutely stunned.
to the complex and conflicting motives explored in her trial, and finally that contentious journey to her recent parole hearing.
And the case continues to resonate, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Not just for the victims and their families who live with this every day, but for what it reveals about how we as a society grapple with these unimaginable crimes.
Yeah.
And the complexities of mental health, human behavior, and the very meaning of justice itself.
This story really compels us to ask, what truly constitutes accountability for such a profound loss? And can redemption ever truly be earned for acts that inflict such widespread and lasting pain?
It also raises that difficult question: when is enough, truly enough? In the eyes of the law, yes, but also in the eyes of those whose lives are forever irrevocably altered by such a tragedy.
Susan Smith has been arrested and will be charged with 2 counts of murder in connection with the deaths of her children.
I've been dreading this for 6 months. I'm not going to let what happened to them be in vain. I'll never stop fighting for their justice, which is keeping her in prison where she belongs.